Guidelines which require judges to consider more lenient sentences for offenders from deprived backgrounds should be overhauled. That's according to Shadow Justice Minister Dr Kieran Mullan.
Now, this comes after a case where there was a couple convicted of dealing Class A drugs and having an offensive weapon, but they got a suspended sentence, so no time behind bars, after citing poverty as a mitigating factor for their crimes. So, should criminals who live in poverty be spared jail because of their circumstances, or does that feel like it isn't justice?
Dr Kieran Mullan says we can't excuse criminal acts because of the perpetrator's background, whilst criminal defence solicitor Kotrie says poverty should be relevant to the crime.
Can we just point out that, Dr Kieran Mullan, you are the Shadow Justice Minister who is saying that this is too lenient. So what are you doing about it in your role as a politician?
Well, the first thing I've done is refer this particular case to the unduly lenient sentence scheme, which is a process that we introduced to allow you to appeal sentences. Anyone can do it, actually, the way you think it hasn't been duly lenient. It's up to the Attorney-General to look at that and make a decision on the individual case basis. But this comes from a wider decision that was taken last year by the Independent Sentencing Council to list a whole load of things, actually, that they said should be taken into account as mitigating circumstances, including poverty, other things, an adverse experience of authority, a whole range of things that I think at the time we in government were very clear were not a sensible thing to do. They proceeded with that anyway. And actually, the people I think most about when it comes to discussing these issues are the very many people, the millions of people who are on a lower wage, unemployed perhaps, and the vast majority of them don't turn to crime as a way of making the ends meet. And I think when you let people off or give them a softer sentence because of that, it's an insult to those people who are every day, day in, day out, making the right choices.
Just to understand, this was last April before the election. The Justice Secretary at the time, the Lord Chancellor, Alex Chalk, said it was patronising and inaccurate, but he didn't have the power to stop the Sentencing Council making this change.
No, it's the Sentencing Council's independent, and it's one of these quangos that gets set up perhaps for good reason, but you know, there are issues because they're not necessarily, I would say, is in touch with the public sentiment on these issues as politicians can be. Our new leadership has talked about how we need to rebalance some of these quangos, because I think they have to be accountable to public sensitivities on issues like this.
When do you hear back about whether this sentence is judged to be justified or too lenient?
They have up to 28 days to review it, consider it. So they could say tomorrow, they could say in a couple of weeks.
OK.
And have you asked Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary in Parliament, whether she agrees with you?
I haven't had the chance yet, and we'll have justice questions coming up as a set of justice ministers.
What would she say, do you think?
I think what the argument is, and I understand it, that people have challenging circumstances and we need to have just the right people in prison. But let's be clear, you know, these are serious offences. This is dealing Class A drugs. Of course, minor offences won't very rarely be given a prison sentence anyway. I think what has to come first is actually the message we send to the vast law-abiding majority, the incentives we give for people to make the right choices and ensuring people are properly punished by the justice system.
Kotrie, you are a criminal defence lawyer, so, you know, it could have been that you were defending this couple in court and therefore providing mitigating factors.
And I've used mitigation like these factors on a regular basis.
Right. One of the things that was said in court by their defence lawyer was that these two did not feel they had any other alternative than to embark on this enterprise, as one of them was unemployed and the other one's wage was minimal. A lot of people will think, hang on a moment, if you're unemployed or you have barely any income, you have plenty of alternatives than to become a Class A drug dealer.
Well, it's not necessarily the way I would have put it if I was mitigating on this particular occasion.
How would you have put it?
I think it's important to give all personal circumstances of someone who's being sentenced. It's very important for a judge to sentence the person as well as the offence. It's only fair. Personal circumstances, personal mitigation is as old as time. Just because this is now codified in sentencing guidelines last year, it's way down at the bottom. There are so many other things that a judge needs to consider before then, and it's discretionary. I can talk, any defence advocate can talk as much as they want about someone's finances, but whether or not a judge actually takes that into account or gives it any weight is up to them.
That's interesting. So it may have been what was taken into account was, in fact, the fact that they had children.
Exactly.
Their absence would have had a devastating impact on their one-year-old son, as well as one of the parents' two other children. So we don't know what the judge might have taken into account.
A very important point, and that's not being reported. We don't know if they had previous convictions, if there are mental health issues involved. There could be all sorts of different points of mitigation, but we just don't know. These are headlines.
Yeah, let's get back to the Shadow Justice Minister's point, who says there are plenty of people who might be experiencing all of these mitigating factors who simply do not commit crimes. So how can you use these factors as, some people might think, excuses to get out of jail?
Well, and that's the point, but these are not excuses. These are reasons for someone making that decision, and they've made that decision. They've made a conscious decision to commit a crime. And at that point, they have to be punished. And they are punished, but the level of which they are punished depends on their personal mitigation and the offence itself.
But I think the challenge is that it kind of undermines one of our core principles, is that we're all equal before the law, that our circumstances are one thing, and there are lots of things that we can do as a society to tackle those things at root cause, to make it less likely that someone might take the route of criminality. But once you cross that line,
then why don't we?
Then it is, I'm afraid, then you should be treated and sentenced the same as everybody else.
On each prisoner every year. We imprison more people per capita in this country than any other country in Western Europe. It doesn't seem to be the answer.
Can I ask you, Lim, one of the mitigating factors is early exposure to family members committing crime. I think what that might say to people is, if you come from a family that commits crime and you then commit crime, and you know that because your dad committed crime, you're unlikely to go to prison for it, doesn't that actually encourage you to follow in those footsteps rather than dissuade you?
In my experience, the fear of sentencing is less of a dissuasion to commit crimes than other things in people's life. Better influences is what people need.
Yeah, but if people don't have better influences...
Sorry?
If people don't have those better influences and they've committed the crime, then surely the jail sentence is significant.
Well, I think that's why we should be talking more about investing in young people, Sure Star centres and everything else, rather than talking about sending more people to prison. Again, I think we send too many people to prison. I'm not saying that drug dealers shouldn't go to prison. Can I make that very clear? But I think personal mitigation is very important. And to say that we should treat everyone exactly the same and not listen to any personal mitigation, I think it's just irresponsible.
But if you think of the welfare of if it's correct that growing up in a criminal environment affects your chances of offending later. If you're thinking about the welfare of the one-year-old child, it's not all clear that the welfare of the one-year-old child is better with the parents being out of jail and at home, or the child having parents who've gone to prison and been taken out of that environment.
And do both things at the same time. You can help people and tackle these issues, but just say when you cross the line, when you actually turn to criminality, that we draw the line there and say you should be punished just the same as everybody else.
All right. Well, let us know what happens with your too lenient appeal. And Liam Kotrie, thank you very much indeed for explaining the guidelines to us.